Good morning. I'm still reporting on monetary reform. There will not be too many days remaining where I can film outside, so now that I have access to my old channel, I can go back to my treasure trove of older reports on topics like monetary reform. This one was done over 10 years ago and features an otherwise obscure lecture given over 10 years ago by Michael Kumhof, the Senior Research Advisor at the Bank of England's Research Hub. Good morning. I'm still reporting on the economy. In August 2012, International Monetary Fund researchers Michael Kumhof and Jerome Bernays published a paper which confirmed much of what I've been writing about for the past 34 years. The paper was entitled "The Chicago Plan Revisited." In the depths of the Great Depression of the 1930s, Professor Irving Fisher of Yale University and several other distinguished professors from the University of Chicago prepared a plan to show President Roosevelt how to get the nation out of the Depression. In 1936, Professor Fisher wrote a little book called 100% Money, which I highly recommend and reprint in its entirety in my book, No More National Debt. When Kumhof and Bernays' paper first came out, critics said that since it was published by the IMF, it couldn't possibly be true, that it must be some sort of IMF disinformation. But as I have said time after time, everything is not a conspiracy. Anyone who is a legitimate researcher, who takes an honest look at the evidence spanning back thousands of years, cannot help but come to the same conclusion. It's actually pretty simple stuff that anyone can understand. And 100 years from now, people will look back at this era of the debt-money monopoly and shake their heads in disbelief, wondering how humanity could have been so stupid as to let banks create our money by lending it to us. It's really unbelievable, but it's true. Last November, Kumhof gave a talk at the London School of Economics and made some important points. These are so important, I'm going to take them one by one and create a series of short clips from this talk, followed by commentary. First of all, Kumhof tells his audience that his comments do not represent the official position of the International Monetary Fund.
And as I always have to do with these kinds of presentations, I have to put up the disclaimer. It's particularly relevant here because this paper does not in any way represent an official policy position of the International Monetary Fund. It is research, okay? But we like to have debate, and this certainly has caused debate.
I have been in this exact auditorium at the LSE, and the audience is typically mostly economics professors and their students and leaders of the financial sector. He then explains what brought him to look at the Chicago Plan.
We are currently in a situation where there's a lot of attention to the financial system and its problems, more so than at any time since the Great Depression. But in the Great Depression, there was a similar level of attention to problems in the financial system, and a very large share of the then leading macroeconomists put forward a plan that became known as the Chicago Plan because many of its advocates sat at the University of Chicago.
He then explains how these 1930s economists saw the situation so much more clearly than economists of today do.
When you read the debates that happened during those times and the papers that were written during those times, what struck me, what is really amazing, is that the level of understanding, the depth of understanding of what banking really is, was literally far greater than it is today. I'm not joking, okay? Today we are very much involved in very technical debates about how do we fine-tune the financial supervision with Basel, etc., keeping our existing system intact but making sure it works better. What those guys did in the 1930s was to think about how do we design a system from the ground up where we would not have many of the problems that we have in the first place. What would such a system have to look like? And it was based on an understanding of what banking actually is. And I will argue today that a lot of theorizing that goes on about what banking is today is plain wrong.
Kumhof then gets right down to his most important point.
That credit cannot be financed by creation of bank deposits ex nihilo, out of thin air, which is exactly how credit is funded today.
Let's be sure we understand just what he said, that credit cannot be financed by creation of bank deposits ex nihilo, out of thin air, which is exactly how credit is funded today. As I have said on this YouTube channel hundreds of times, the main thing people don't understand is that the government in today's world does not create money. Commercial banks create over 90% of the money out of thin air.
The key function of banks today is money creation. It is not intermediation.
What is intermediation? It means only lending out money they actually have.
Banks do not intermediate pre-existing savings. Banks do not wait for granny to walk in through the door and deposit some money so that they can lend it to somebody else. Instead, what banks do is they create new money, ex nihilo, out of thin air, in the act of lending. And I emphasize that this is not a theory, this is a fact. In my work, I'm listing many quotes from central bank publications that say so. You just have to look in the right place. What that means is that banks are almost fully in control of the money creation process.
If you take nothing else away from this channel, understand this: the government is not in control of our money. Commercial banks are. This is the greatest misunderstanding people have about money today. The media doesn't understand this, the politicians don't understand it, and even most of the professors either don't understand it or are so dependent on the existing system that they won't teach it to upcoming students. And until we understand this, we cannot ever fix our economic problems. This is nothing less than a private monopoly on the quantity of money in virtually every nation on earth, and ultimately puts banks in control of the governing process as well, and thereby destroys the basic tenet of self-governance, that government operate in the public interest, not in the interest of a small group of designated financial royalty. I'm still reporting on the economy. Good day.